missing city manager. So I'm amazed at what you've already done. I just think it's amazing. I'm fine with moving this quickly forward and doing a 2019 and getting already, despite the fact that we don't know what caliber is coming forward. We know how much money we think it might be. Maybe we take 20, 30 million and say we're going to put it on. What I'm worried about is the park thing will go on. People who don't understand what's happening in other parts of the city in different hotspot areas will vote yes for it, and then we haven't, and then the next year we are not going to get something for. And the bond fatigue is going to happen the second year, not the first year. So I'm fine with you. If you want to go with 2019, I'm game. Councilmember Cuesta, you look like you're going to.
Thank you, Mayor. I would go forward in 2019 as well, and maybe we just we look for a number that we think we could make some considerable progress with, be it 20, 30, and I think something that's still palatable. As much as I appreciate we get real lean with that budget, let's say we're knocking off 10% of our $50 million budget. We're getting $5 million a year, and if we're talking 80 to $100 million, we're talking 16, 20 years that we'd have to do that, and that's just not going to get us there either. I am a bit concerned that we could just end up in a jam here. Again, as I look at the citizen survey from 2018, not a single one of these initiatives, be it parks, maintenance, got over 50%. Right. And if we don't get this bond, and I don't have a solution here, I just don't know what the heck we're going to do, because I don't think there's a way to tighten the belt out of this, of capital needs that we have of this magnitude. Happy to support it in 2019, though. The sooner we can get something in front of the voters, the better. I agree that I'm concerned about fatigue. Mayor Olson, that jail that you mentioned, or the prison that you mentioned, is that for 2020 or is that for 2019?
2020.
Gotcha.
You're
So
doing the presidential election because more voters come out.
Sure. And that could be you have a large scale bond like that. All our voters are Arapahoe County. You've got ours on there too.
I mean, it's
it
a lot of
pretty
cities,
stacked.
a lot of people contributing
Sure.
to it, right? I don't know what impact it will have.
Sure.
I've asked for things to be sent to me so I can send it out to you all, but no one sent me anything.
But that could be at least 2 Inglewood citizens would be looking at then if ours is on there as well, between the two. 2019 sounds great. The sooner we can, the better. And just something we can get past.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No,
they
please.
also
Thank
are
you.
doing, they're going to do what we talked about doing a couple weeks ago. They're employing an outside company to help them gauge the interest and willingness, because they don't want to have it not pass either, because you don't ask the next year again. You have to wait a couple years, and they have some problems at the county jail, and they want to do some other issues with it too, not just prison, but or jail, but other programs that help with recidivism and that kind of thing. So I don't know. I am really concerned that we've already messed our timing up here, and we don't have a comprehensive sort of set of what citizens will do. And if we put a little thing forward this year and then try another thing next year, bond fatigue, I mean, it's real. You know it. I think we're in a rock and a hard place. So others want to weigh in. Who wants to do a 2019 and push it? Would be just for one thing, which I'm not sure that's the other thing that I don't know is, are alleys really, because that would not be in this 2019. It would be an enterprise, a stormwater, which we can't totally do in a way that gets enough money either, right? So anyway, go ahead. You're going to speak, Director Hargrove.
That would be whether alleys are the top priority or a top priority. We hear that from a lot of people. Is that statistically significant? We don't know. If you wanted to do a very small bond issue supported by user fees for stormwater, we could probably make some progress, but we don't know what that looks like. We do lose the synergistic effects of working on parks and stormwater at the same time if we go with one small vote. I mean, there are lots of things to keep in the air. I will repeat that given all the pros and cons, and they're very real, I think it would be a big mistake to go before the voters in 2019. I'll say it categorically. I think it would fail, and I think that would be a problem moving forward, and we would not achieve our community goals.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
So can I ask a question about alleys? Are we talking about paving all of the alleys in the city? Is that what that means? I think we would definitely need a study, because paved alleys would increase the runoff and might increase flooding.
ripping this out of your hands. But I think what they're talking about is looking at the different types of surfacing that would be a permeable surface to make that. It wouldn't be probably concrete, but I won't speak for our Public Works Director, but I know that that is one of the considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Barentine.
I just wanted to make that correction because the original slide said alleys, 80 million, and then the later slide said paving. And so the alleys are important, and there's been a lot of talk about the alleys for the road grade and the lack of maintenance that's been done over the last 4 years and actually stopping doing significant normal maintenance that had been done. I was talking about paving the alleys, not going ahead and correcting the deterioration that's been allowed to happen, the two different things. So I don't think that we have had a clear mandate that people want to spend that kind of money to pave them. I think there's been a lot of discussion on making sure that they got maintained. Just wanted to make that correction.
Councilmember Martinez.
I love the idea of going forward in 2019, but we just voted down getting survey results from citizens to see if they have an appetite for this kind of funding. It is a large ask. And I would hesitate to do it piecemeal because of what was discussed already, that the projects intersect with timing and implementation. We don't want to just completely redo the storm drains and then next year have to rip up the streets and do the streets again. So it seems to me that they all kind of go together. So of course, I would like it sooner than later, but I don't want to rush in and then have the voters say no, and then we're at square one again also. So as much as I would like to go forward in 2019, I think, from my perspective, 2020 is the best way to go. It gives us the most thorough planning and asking for what we need all at once instead of piecemeal.
All right, I would think we're sort of in a mix here. I'm not sure if we've given you any direction. So let's head around again. I heard Councilmember Martinez say 2020 is the higher, better option. Member Wink, the same thing. Member Cuesta.
2020. I don't believe we have the time. If we can get it done in 2019, that'd be my preference. You're not falling on deaf ears here, City Manager Hargrove, with your perspective on our odds there in 2019. But for me, time is just absolutely critical at this point. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Time is absolutely critical. And so if there's any way to get it done in 2019, I would like to. I understand. If we want to wait till 2020, I prefer 2019, but.
Councilmember Sierra.
City Manager Hargrove, you stated that you just don't have the confidence that 2019 would, the likelihood of it passing is lower than we would like. So based off just your viewpoint and everything stated tonight, 2020 seems the more realistic option for Vaughn.
Councilmember Barentine.
I think this whole process with the flood has taught us we have to be able to move a lot faster. I mean, we're almost coming up on a year with this whole thing, and we've done nothing. I don't think it's dependent on whether the survey got done or not. The survey option wasn't even brought forward to us as actually a real survey, and it was kind of confusing at the time. And what we were kind of doing, it was in combination with other stuff. We've got to be a little bit more purposeful in what we're doing and get our priorities straight. If you don't think it'll pass in 2019 and we don't have the time for it, then I want to make sure that we do every effort to take the funding we have and do the best priorities and make the best bang for our buck now, and because we don't know that 2020 is going to save us either. So we have to start with what we have now and do the very best job we can and move forward, and then I guess we're stuck with 2020.
Sounds like a consensus for 2020. I think what I'm hearing from everyone is a $6.6 million is still left on the table, and I think a really great hotspot-oriented plan that you could bring back just to say, this is what we think this money could be used at the highest level, even as we wait for the caliber study? We know some areas that maybe we need, maybe it is some of the work in the alleys and maintaining in a way so that there isn't more flooding.
And thank you for the discussion and the guidance. This will inform the discussion and proposals on May 11th for the budget workshop that we're having that day. But this was just to get a good feeling about where we needed to go, and I think that's been very, very helpful tonight, so thank you.
A question towards that, on that May 11th day, what could you bring back to us what will we do that day that could be specific around this particular item? Because I think it's high alert for all of us, and is there anything in particular we could help you bring back during that day that would help us be better in prioritizing?
Well, I think some of the information that Mayor Pro Tem has discussed many times, the savings that we would bring forth. I do want to mention, that we really can't take just a flat 5% because there's discretionary and there's non-discretionary as part of that 50. So I think you've given me direction to perhaps come back and outline what that possibly could be. In addition, looking at other savings potentials that are just based on initiatives of process improvement, which we already planned on doing, rather than just solely looking at across the board cuts. And then what we did plan on doing is kind of giving an overview of key programs in specific areas. And the groups are all talking about their capital needs. But you've given us direction to perhaps talk specifically about, with the funds we have right now, what would be a list of recommendation for you to have conversation about as far as prioritization. I think that's what I've heard you ask for. I guess I could ask in return, was there something else based on the conversation tonight that we should prepare for?
Councilmember Barentine, I know your light is on. Is it in relation to the question she just asked, or I'll come back to you if it isn't?
When's the Kleber study doing?
End of May.
I don't see it scheduled. Do you know when that is?
The recommendation that I got this week from the Public Works Director was to ask for a study session on June 10th, which would be our next available time.
June 10th?
Yeah.
And where does that fall in our budget schedule? I mean, I'm concerned that something so critical is so late in the process. Never mind. It's fine. I'm done.
And the first question that she asked about whether there was anything else for the May 11th, and of course we've got a little bit more time to come up with some more if we need to. Councilmember Martinez?
What I heard from some members of council tonight is maybe of these 5 top areas, maybe some members didn't think some were top priorities. So maybe a way for us to kind of talk through and decide which one of these, out of storm drainage, park rec, streets, street lighting, and alleys, if we need to take any of those out of our prioritization, maybe that's a topic of discussion at that time.
It's helpful. Thank you. All right. This is a tough decision. This is a tough topic. We've not had a council that's been willing to even entertain a bond or any kind of sales or any kind of thinking about increasing. It's always kind of gotten, except for the police station, right? And when it comes to public works and parks and a number of other things, we've just not gone there. So this is about infrastructure that doesn't show a nice, wonderful building, which we needed badly as well. So you're right, Councilmember Barentine. And also, we did make a huge decision regarding fire that actually put us in a different place financially as well. So I shouldn't say that we haven't done this before. It's just different. Thank you. Let's take a break and come back at, 8:35 or 8:36. And then.
want to join me? Yeah.
So we should, maybe we can spend a few minutes, maybe after OAC, going over their budget, because I'm not sure if I'm tracking it in line. Mostly just the extra costs. Yes. Because I'm assuming you haven't taken out like the extra canopies out of that last one you sent. Okay. Good.
When I did the budget last Friday. And I had to like leave and come back, and then I figured out what's
Okay.
actually going on.
Yeah.
Because I thought I had revised the budget and put in the canopies, had taken out the canopies, and that freaked me out.
Okay.
It's like, what's going on here? So it was just the furniture, those 3 items that I mentioned.
Okay. So yeah, it'd be good. So I've trued up with our internal finances. So then I think it's just a matter of getting my weird spreadsheet. Where is it? You know, that just that we're tracking everything. So
And maybe
the
it
same.
might help to take a look kind of at the change requests that we have in the system.
Yeah.
Because what I send you is just a compilation of everything, so it's hard for you to
Yeah.
actually read it.
Yeah.
That's what I have trouble with anyway, so I always go back and take a look through things.
Yeah.
Good luck tonight.
Thanks.
Do you want me to just help with any questions?
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
introduce you so that they know why you're sitting up here.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it should be pretty quick. But I'm just going to say, you know, these are necessary, and we've adjusted the budget to accommodate these additional requests. And you know, we think this is the last time that we're going to be coming forward to you. That's the other big thing. So, and, yeah.
Well, the good thing is, I think fully aware that they can
Good.
move forward with anything without approval.
Yeah.
And that if anything affects timeline where it's going to push out more, that we need to know.
Yeah.
So I think I've said it enough times to finally have it sink in.
Good.
So do you have to come to these meetings every Monday then? It makes me very lonely.
It does. And I'm exhausted for the rest of the week.
Because you have to be here the entire time.
Yeah, I've
Right.
been here for over 12 hours already. Hey, this is gonna be early tonight.
All right.
Yeah, usually it's like some nights it's like midnight, which is why I'm so exhausted on Tuesdays, and then you catch up like through the rest of the week, and by Friday it's like, oh crap, it's the weekend again. I get to do it again on Monday.
Did you have a nice Easter? Celebrate anything? Do anything?
No, I didn't really do anything, so worked. You know, what about you?
My girls just,
Did the whole,
you know.
yeah,
at
dressed
night,
up.
Yeah, I got them. They looked so cute.
All right.
Yes. Had a little too much sugar. And last night, running around.
You have to do that sometime.
I know.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get everybody seated so we can finish up here.
Be sure to talk right into the microphone. They're really, it's hard.
Can you do it in 10 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can remember to talk into the microphone.
Yeah, if you just talk right into it, it helps. All right, our next agenda item is the police building update, and the Public Works Director, Maria DeAndrea, is here to present, to give an update, and the financial, particularly, overview.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. The back at not the last City Council meeting, but 2 meetings ago, we had brought forward a change order for discussion, and it prompted some additional questions from Council about just the overall budget, where we were, and so that's what we want to present to you tonight. And really, hopefully, that this will be the last time that we're coming before you, that we've opened the building, we're heading into phase 2, and that we can come bring this to a positive conclusion later on this fall. I would like to introduce with me, I have Audra Johnson, who's the project manager for CBRE, our construction manager, with me tonight, in case there's any specific questions that I can't answer. But with that, basically what we brought before you, I have provided a very detailed list of all the remaining outstanding items. We have consulted with the police department. I have cross-checked that against our internal budget that finance has provided, worked with the finance department, and so we feel comfortable with these numbers of the remaining outstanding items. I won't go through those in detail, but I will say that those items that have been identified as critical and necessary for the completion of the project and or where the city is contractually obligated to pay for them. What we've done to accommodate that, we are drawing down all of the remaining building contingency, and then we have reduced some of the canopies. So that was, I believe, one of the change orders we'd actually brought before council, and we're actually going to take some of those out just because of the complexity of installing them and the very high cost. We've also reduced the budget that we had kind of targeted for that Fox building annex, and really it was a pretty high number. It was a very high level estimate, and we feel comfortable reducing that in order to make that bottom line basically still with a little over $1 million for that remaining project balance. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions, council members? Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a brief question. The gate around the parking area, what material will that be made of?
It will be kind of a pretty thick mesh so that the police department, just like the perimeter wall that we designed, which was originally more of a chain link, and then we went to that more brick panels with some insets. The police want that to be visually obstructed so that they can't see. So it is a metal panel, not just an open kind of gate that you can see through.
Great. And how tall will it be?
I believe it's 8 feet.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I think your chief is saying 6.
Is that the, yeah, we'll double check on
Code
that.
is 6 feet, but I imagine that the police department can have a
Zoning
waiver.
may require just a minimum, or the maximum is 6 feet, but so that may be true. Thank you, Chief. We'll double check on that and get back, present that answer back.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns? All right. Seems like everybody's gotten what they need then.
So
Thank
we
you.
will be bringing change orders forward on May 6th for the ballistic glass. We had talked about that at a previous city council meeting, but we haven't made the actual decision to move forward with that with a formal vote. So you'll see that on May 6th, as well as the one of the AMP change orders, and then potentially if we can't negotiate with DLR, you may see that one as well. And then the other items are within the match the new procurement policy, so we'll do those internally administratively.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next is item 6, EAF audit discussion. So Finance and Administrative Services Director Maria Sabata is here to present and discuss with us the EAF audit firm's interviews and our choice that we would like to make.
Good evening again. So last week you had an opportunity to interview 3 firms that submitted proposals for the Englewood Environmental Foundation audit, and tonight's we were asked to allot time for you to discuss those proposals and presentations. You had requested that you receive the presentations, and they were added to the agenda item from last week, so you should have seen those. So at this point, it's open to your discretion.
All right, so we need to get some sort of a consensus on maybe some first, second, thirds on this and who we'd want to go to contract with and bring it forward to a regular meeting. So somebody want to kick us off? Councilmember Cuesta?
Thank you, Mayor. To the discussion we had last week, were you able to get an estimate on how many transactions you think will be available for audit? Oh, excuse me.
Yes. So if I can just
Please go ahead,
point
yeah.
you to the summary section of the memo. It describes the transactions, approximately 600 journal entries, 1,600 receipts, and 4,300 checks processed. And per our retention policy, hard copy documents related to the payment and receipt transactions, including bank statements, are available for the periods from 2011 to 2018. We also have electronic records for financial reports, bank records, journal entries related to cash payments, cash receipts, and the City of Englewood salary allocations to EVE since 1998.
Thank you. So it looks like we're going all the way back to the origination. Of the
For
entity.
electronic documentation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Could I follow up with that? To what extent, what is in that particular cache of documents in the electronic, but going back to 1998, is it sort of
So-
everything related to bank records and journal entries? Is it all there?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
So the hard copy documents of payments are per the 7 years per the retention policy, 2011 to 2018.
Okay. Councilmember Cuesta, did you just not turn your light off? Or okay, that's right. Anybody else? All right. So, what's your interest in these two firms? Three. There's three firms. Do you want to move one of them particularly forward to contract?
I am concerned that we'd be making a decision here. I am concerned about that, discussing the pros and cons of each of them. Having that kind of conversation is one thing. Making a decision here, I think, is inappropriate.
Well, let's do the pros and cons of each tonight then. We've got a few minutes to talk about that. You don't want to do that either? No. Okay. Anybody else want to do that? Or you want to push it off to the regular meeting? Councilmember Cuesta.
One of my takeaways that I thought was interesting was the first group, they said that, and they give us that range of pricing, and that the fullest scope of pricing or our max cost was if they went through every transaction, it seemed, almost uniquely. They'd go through every single one. And then the second group we got to, they were going to do a sample size of 100. And then I believe the third group, they were in the 2,200 range, and that's off the top of my head. So it was very different, I thought, comprehensiveness of work that we were going to get out of it. And after all was said and done, the gentleman in the middle said, how can somebody uniquely look at 6,500 transactions? And so I did start to wonder about the cost of how can they get through that many to really spend the time you would need for that max cost that they had quoted to us. So that's what I kind of walked away with, was what was the sample size, who was going to give us the best that we could get out of it. And although I like the idea of somebody looking at all 6,500, it didn't seem as feasible once I heard from the following two groups. That it could be done, of course, but not at the price they had quoted. And to me, I didn't see how they were going to get that much work done for what they had quoted us. Although they seemed more than capable. It seemed like a very good group.
So did you have a little bit more confidence in the second and third in terms of being able to really look at realistically the
the thing that I liked about the third group is it seemed like they were just jumping right into, let's see if there was fraud or not. And at the end of the day, I think that that's what we're trying to ease people's mind on is whether or not fraud took place. And I think that they were just going to cut to the chase and go straight to that, if I understood correctly, where the other group said there were other earlier stages they could start at. And then if they found things that just triggered them in that manner, that they thought there was an issue, then they would look into that sort of investigation. I wouldn't say I'm leaning toward, well, I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Sierra.
I looked at the same issue that Councilmember Cuesta did. I was thinking about that aspect of it. The one thing that did stick up, because Councilmember Cuesta brought it up, was just the confidence in the sample was something else that I was looking at. One was saying 1,600, I believe. The other one said 100. But also, I believe it was CICN that stated that it was about 100 that they had a confidence in, interval of 95%, 10% margin of error, something along those lines. But they did say that they would be happy to talk about what our requirements would be. So if we're not happy with the 100, we can look at a different sample. Really, I was just looking between. It came down to 1 and 2 for me in terms of who I was looking at more closely. The one question I had about number 1, though, was just their insistence, not really an insistence, but they kept stating that an ICE plus a forensic audit made the most sense based off our requirements, but I kept coming back to whether or not the ICE was actually really a requirement for us. I saw the internal audit more of the internal audit with the forensic, to me, for number 1 made a little bit more sense. And with that range, obviously we don't know what the price point is, but I just wasn't sure if anybody else felt that the internal controls aspect of it was really required. Just because they broke it out, they said that that was different than any other company, that was specific to them, that they offer that. So I'm not sure how we can really compare apples to apples when they're the only ones that offer that service as a separate, solution, I guess.
Director Sabata, you've done these before, haven't you? Have you done, you've done audits that have looked for fraud, haven't you?
Excuse me. No, I've conducted internal audits that I've uncovered fraud during the process of doing the internal audit. And as I think the first firm mentioned, if I may, they did exactly what I have, or they suggested that what happens is once they've identified fraud, they go to the client and they say, we've identified fraud, should the direction of the audit change? Which is what I suggested as well as an auditor when I discovered fraud, because we had a limited time to conduct the audit, and once fraud's uncovered, you ask the client, should I redirect?
So this whole thing of the numbers of entries to look at in the sampling size and stuff, is that after you find the fraud? No, that's before you find the fraud, right?
Yeah, it would be more than likely. I mean, I can't speak for the vendors that presented last week, but in my particular case, we selected the sample, and if fraud was uncovered, then it changed the direction.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Martinez, I think you were next.
What I liked about the first group, what impressed me the most about them, is that internal controls examination piece of it, and also then the fraud component, and their seemed like comfort level and expertise with going through more transactions. I feel more comfortable, I guess, with that. If we're going to go through this process, the more transaction review would be better to me than just a smaller sample. Mm-hmm. So for those reasons, I was more impressed with the first group.
Councilmember Cuesta. Oh, I think Councilmember Barentine hasn't spoken, if you don't mind. Well, actually you did. Go ahead.
No, mine remained on. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Barentine.
I'm concerned all 3 of them, the last 2 focused more on what is fraud, not following process, not doing bids, not doing contracts. That'll take them 5 minutes. We didn't have a process, we didn't do contracts, and we didn't do bids. That's been part of the issue with this. I do appreciate that at least the first group at least acknowledged that they knew that. The second thing was that the rules that they go under, when you're defining this as a separate group, which is what also the catalyst for all these problems is that they kept defining themselves as a separate group, and we found out that back in 1998 or 1990 or 2000, they were designated as a government entity, as an arm of the government, which means they're under the rules of the government, and at least the first group was the only one that said that they understood that and knew that. The other 2, we're still keeping them as separate as if they were a 501c3, and we've all painfully come to the understanding that they're not. So I was a little concerned about the sample size. So I mean, I've done some audits and worked with some CPAs and done audits, and I'm not sure that the 65, I don't think that they've bitten off more than they can chew. That's a drop in the bucket. I mean, this is actually a very small for any kind of company, or for 22 years, 290 transactions per year, to be able to go through that. A lot of them are pretty repetitive until they're working with that. I did have some concern with them working with the city before and whether that would cause any problem, but I think that they answered my question pretty well. So I guess either 1 or 3 was more impressive to me. I was a little concerned that there wasn't as much homework done by the middle group from some of the comments that they made, and I'm very concerned about something as small as 100, but I guess we'll decide when.
Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. All 3 firms are clearly capable. I had a strong preference to Eide Bailly, number 1. As I did when we initially reviewed 6 or 5 firms, I feel very strongly about the level of training and background of the team members there, coupled by their governmental experience and familiarity. Loved their engagement, the level of engagement with the city in terms of what had happened, and their flexibility. They come to us with a tool belt, with tool belts filled with variety and expertise, and I think they would I would feel very comfortable should we give the contract to them. I would know it would get done thoroughly and appropriately, such that the matter could be closed once they complete their work with us. And I think that's what needs to happen here. Thank you.
Thank you. Others want to weigh in? Mayor Pro Tem?
I actually appreciate all the things that have been shared, and I share a lot of those viewpoints. The one thing that that I picked up on that I believe said a lot to me, because it actually changed my opinion a little bit from my initial reading. And I actually, when I pulled out the original paperwork that we got for them before we decided, and looked through it again, and I had starred several of the things that Councilmember Wink shared. But the other thing that I like is I believe that number 1 did vet the price from doing minimal all the way through, and it is a guaranteed price. They're not going to increase the price at the end. And I think in a couple of the questions that I asked, especially the other 2, it would be more for certain things, and so their price isn't as firm, I believe, as number 1. So, thank you.
Anyone else? So, City Attorney, we have put lots of things forward by consensus. Is this something that we can't choose one of these 3 to kind of go into some contract with to see what comes back and then take it to regular, or do we need to make this decision over in a different way?
You can, by consensus.
Put it up closer. Just put it up to your mouth. There you go.
Can you hear me now? You can, by consensus, direct staff to bring a contract back to the next meeting with whichever designated entity that you choose to. You make the decision whether or not to accept that contract or whether or not to enter into that at the time that you approve the contract. So it's been pretty common practice for this council to direct staff through consensus.
I'm hearing several for Eide Bailly, and then perhaps, I'm not sure, maybe one not so sure. I'm fine with Eide Bailly as well. I would like, to be honest, I just want to get this done. So if that's one, I thought they were very deep in their abilities to serve us in a number of ways, and I don't think 6,000 is very many to have to deal with either. I just think they can probably do it in a very short time. It might be a little different than some of the others, but I like that they're closer to us too, so if there's some problems, they get what's going on and we can have some quick interaction and face-to-face. I think face-to-face leaves less for miscommunication as email or other forms might be, but I don't know if others want to weigh in. Go ahead.
Are you seeking consensus?
I am. Yeah, I am.
I'm happy to move Ide Bailey forward. At the end of the day, and this was something when we first discussed bringing him back, something that will close the door on this entirely. They said they'd go through every transaction. That seems like the best bet we're going to get on getting an answer one way or the other, and then moving forward accordingly. So if nothing else, they'll check every one, and that's positive. Whereas you could say the other one, they're checking 100. I think he said 95% confidence. 1 in 20, maybe they did miss something. So I want to remove as much doubt as possible, and it seemed like Ide Bailey had the best track for getting there. Thank you.
Anyone else? Looks like we have at least a consensus to bring a contract forward, right? Yeah. Councilmember Sierra, you okay with this pushing forward on Ide Bailey?
Yeah, I
didn't
am,
say
but I guess
this.
there is one question though. Since there is 3 different packages that they reference, do we have to discuss that aspect of it as well, or is that something that staff is going to come
Probably
back
would.
to us?
That was actually going to be one of my questions.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yes, please help us out.
So one of the things that we could do in the contract is a not to exceed, and we could give checkpoint, throughout the audit. I also had a question as to who will be the project manager of the audit, or what body will be that interaction directly with them. Will it be the EAF board? Will it be you? So I think some of those things I'd like to understand. I need a little bit more direction when I bring forth the contract so we can be perfectly clear as to how this will move forward.
Very good questions. So they had a 2-part, starting with the ICE, right? Was that what it was called?
Yes.
Which is such a strange term for me. It means several things in my world. So they would start with that and then go into the other.
I
if
believe
they
that's
found
what they
fraud,
put forth.
right? And then that would, and if not, then they figure out how we're going to do process. And we already, Councilmember Barentine said, we already know what's wrong. We've made it pretty clear that some of the processes are not what we would want today, and those are already being taken care of in a number of ways. So, but more help on that would be good. So what do you recommend? I mean, well, first of all, I guess I ask you all, who do you want to be the point person on this? What's going to be leave the least amount of doubt in anyone's mind that this was done at the top of the 100%? Councilmember Wink.
Is Director Sabota an option?
Yes, she's a director.
I'm a board
and-
member too. Yep.
Yes, she is an option. So you're suggesting her?
Yeah, I think it would make sense to continue with you based on your background and your role here in the city. The fact that you weren't here before, when any of this was taking place.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Actually, I think that this is the body that is approving the hiring, and I think in the interviews that they were very clear that they would interview everyone, including Director Sabota, because she's on the board and she will be intimately involved in it. But I believe that this council, probably the buck stops with us, and so I believe that that this council should have some say.
So could I ask a clarifying question? Do they want a point person to be communicating with? Is that what you're asking for, or is it a body of 7 is okay to?
So, I think every audit team looks for a specific person to ask questions of. And I know that my team will be readily available to answer questions specific to obtaining the information that they need, but also someone to work in conjunction with the council. How often do you want to have updates from them? When do you want to bring those forth? Those sorts of management of the audit per se, just that interaction with them. So they have someone that they can talk to on a regular basis when they're conducting the audit.
Okay. Councilmember Barentine.
I appreciate that you seem to be willing to do that, but it bothers me, and I think that it will create a problem having that title piece to it and being on that board by your position. I think that your team, regardless, will have to work with them, and you'll have to manage, coordinate with them, because you're the chief financial officer. That has to happen. But to have that role and be a board member on this board that's being audited, I think just gives the impression of some conflict of interest there to the public that I wouldn't want to put you in the position of. I wouldn't want to do that to you. So I think that you'll play an integral role, but as far as that, I think maybe the city manager should do that, but I don't want to put you in that position. I don't think it doesn't sound right. I mean, you're going to end up doing a very close working with them anyway because of the nature of your position. I don't know, I just wouldn't want to do that to you.
Okay, so there's a suggestion for the city manager now too, right? Is that what you're suggesting, Councilmember Barentine?
Or council if it's possible, but if you're just talking about those kind of roles, then we need to define exactly what that position would be doing as the point person in the communication. If that's limited to what you're saying, then I think that would be more appropriate with the city manager and you handling the role as the chief financial officer and your team. Otherwise, it should be council if it's more expansive.
How is council going to handle?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Wink.
I'm not sure we've defined it yet either.
So, how, Mayor, do you believe that a 7-member council can respond to day-to-day updates, maybe several times a day, just this ongoing frontline communication with a firm?
I don't
Does that
believe
make
we can as
sense
a
to you?
7-person body, but I totally get that we want to have us be the decision makers in every step of the way.
I think
so
that's
to me,
a
it's
given.
organizing it
Yeah.
and making sure that everybody's got what they need, and that we've made avenues to make interviews when they're needed, and if we have to uncover phone numbers of someone, that we're the ones in the city. But the city has those more than we as a 7-person group. So I take into account what Mayor Pro Tem has said here is we all want to be we're the ones they're answering to in the long run. We want to know it was done right to the end, but who's going to be that point person? I don't know if Councilmember
Well, I was
Martinez,
gonna say,
you have
with
an
that
idea?
too, I don't want us to be the roadblock in this process either, and I don't want us to try to have to manage scheduling,
too.
staff time, and all that stuff. I feel like that wouldn't be a good for anybody. So I think we would just end up being a roadblock if it was the 7 of us.
And they did say they'd be coming back, all 3 groups would be reporting to us all of the time. It was not they knew we were the body. Manager Hargrove, do you think there's a point person that makes sense for this that isn't on the financial end?
I would just point out that in my position, I'm also on the youth board.
Right.
I'd be happy to do it. I just wanted to remind council of that. I think Director Sabata would be the logical person to manage that. I don't think she's going to influence the results. I know she's not going to influence the results, and will report to you. It's scheduling. It's very administrative. It's not involved in the details. So the conflict of interest may be apparent, but there may be an appearance, but I'm not worried that it would be material.
Thank you. So my view of this is whatever those of you, and there are a couple in particular who really wanted this to happen, whatever you feel comfortable with is what I'm willing to go with tonight. I don't care. I really don't. I want it to be done and over with. Councilmember Barentine.
If we could just, since the council was confused about what the point person does, if we could just make sure that it's put out there exactly what that position does, that it's just administrative, that it's just doing this, and this for them, then I think that would help and would define it a little better. Obviously, we were confused thinking that there was some decision-making process that could be interfered with in that. And if there isn't, then we want to make the position very clear and make sure that that's public and out there, what the limitations are and what that's expected, so that there isn't any confusion about it that would fall back on you. Okay?
So now we're back to you being that person, unless somebody else is going to say no. And it's going to be an administrative point person, and that's it. Anything that you want to run by us, we want to get it, right? So we alleviate that kind of burden for you to have to be any decision maker around any of it. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Does that feel like it's workable?
Yes.
All right, everybody's in favor. If you don't turn your light on, say no. All right, good. Then let's bring that kind of a contract forward with that kind of specificity, and we'll move forward. And of course, we all can decide we don't like this group by the end of next week, and we can do it on a second group. All right.
If I can just mention, when we do bring the contract back, I will be mindful of the options that you were all just discussing. And I will suggest that the firm bring forth different alternatives that you will be making a decision about related to the specifics of the audit when we bring it forth. Is that a fair approach?
I would think so. Anybody not in favor of that? Any questions? Yep, I think you read it correctly.
Okay, great.
Thank you. All right, next is our council member's choice. Start with council member Sierra.
Just one item. I wanted to thank Director DeAndre and the rest of Public Works. They've been working on the alleys obviously since the weather's improved. I've been getting good feedback about some of the repaving of the alleys or the maintenance of the alleys, that they're holding up, even though with some of the rain. I've heard from a couple that wasn't the case. But if you go onto the Public Works website, they have added a link that shows when your alley is going to get maintained. So there's 2 phases to it. So the initial phase is basically just trying to get it back into a state that makes it drivable and passable. And then there's going to be a second phase where they're going to lay down an asphalt millings and some dust prevention as well, which is going to take place in the summer. But if you go to Public Works, there is a link that shows you when your alley is going to get done. They broke it up into zones, and then there's an interactive map as well that will show you where they are in that process. So it gets updated daily, I believe, based off of the comments that I have from Director DeAndre. So I just want to thank the work that Public Works have done on this matter. That is all.
Thank you, Councilmember Barentine.
Congratulations to Erica Zerke on becoming the president of the chamber, I believe.
Mhm.
And they were a lot of bunny rabbits running around on Friday night. They had an event downtown, and so there were a lot of people with bunny ears, and they had a egg hunt that I thought was very successful. I went to a couple of the businesses, and it was a lot of interesting conversations. That's all I had.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't have anything tonight.
Okay. Councilmember Cuesta.
I do. Manager Hargrove, the issue of the food trucks, it keeps reappearing. Where is that at with the city? The city is currently reviewing the process that's in place.
Well, we sent what I hoped was a detailed council request explaining the process. And from my perspective, I think our process is fairly clear. I think some of the delay is in communication with some of the food trucks. But if council would like us to re-examine any of our processes or change any of the code, we're certainly open to discussion on that.
And I guess I was under the impression that's the track we were on, is that we were going to review and it was going to come before council and we were going to see if there was anything we can do. I didn't think that was a settled, or are you under the impression it's a settled matter? And maybe that was the case, but I don't recall it being.
I was waiting for a conversation with council about it,
Okay.
for sure.
I think it is worth reviewing. I've had a couple folks contact me. I think something happened at the Tap House on Saturday, and I'm not sure. There was a food truck there. I'm hearing
For some reason, we're not hearing your voice.
Excuse me. Something did happen at the Tap House. My understanding is there was a food truck there. The police were called. I'm not sure who called the police. The police actually showed up. It seems like it's growing into a larger deal than I think it needs to be. I also believe that maybe there's an opportunity here for us to show that government can be nimble and respond to things relatively quickly when there's a demand from citizens. Let me ask you this, and I think this is one of the questions that citizens are a little bit unclear on. What does our current registration process, what does that ensure the citizens? What are they getting? Are there any health assurances, public safety assurances? What are they getting from it that it's taking the time it does?
In order to get a license with the city, you need a show us your driver's license. You need to pass a health inspection. That's probably the most onerous part of it with Tri-County Health. We are not allowed to accept Denver's health. You have to go through Tri-County. And I think that takes a little bit of time, and it's expensive. Well, I don't have the memo in front of me, but it's in the range of $200 or $250 for the initial inspection, and then an annual inspection on top of that for like $150 or something like that. But what that does is ensure us that the food is safe and healthy. You also have to pass a fire marshal's approval so that the propane that is so often on these trucks is not going to blow it up. We do accept and are allowed to accept a Denver fire approval. So we are happy because we're allowed to do that. The city of Englewood does not charge for a fire inspection and try to get that done as quickly as possible. We also require that they tell us how many servers they're going to have on the truck and who those people are so that we can ensure who's serving the public. And then if they need an approval, a site license, if they're going to park on the street in front of a business so that if it's your business, you've approved for them to be there. One license with the city can be accompanied by several different site plans so that the same food truck could have one license with the city but be approved to go to several different sites. I think part of the problem, that's on the licensing part. The other issue with this particular situation is the zoning. The fire marshal did not give approval based on code to have the 100-foot limit, and what the proprietors want to do does not match our city code. They have the opportunity to go before the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, is my understanding. I'm not sure where they are in that process, but the proprietors we've explained that process to them so that they could look for a variance to what is stated in the municipal code.
You bet. And agreed that the zoning is a separate matter and really unique to that particular company. So on the Tri-County, isn't that's not our entity. That's not a division of Englewood. Why are we involving ourselves in that? Isn't that?
Well, we have to have a health inspection. And
from Englewood or from Tri-County?
From Tri-County. We're not allowed to use anyone else's bylaw. Actually, there was a piece of legislation introduced in this legislative session that it would make a statewide approval, so that if a truck was approved by Tri-County, it would be eligible to serve food in Denver. But I don't think it moved forward in the legislature. Right now, we are bound by that by law.
We are required then to enforce whether or not somebody has a health inspection from Tri-County if somebody's serving food in Englewood. Am I understanding that correctly? We need to make sure they've had a health inspection by Tri-County. That's Englewood's responsibility?
Yes, in order to get a license.
That's where I think, and I'll do a little bit of homework myself. I'm understanding these other cities, you can just go online and fill out a license. It takes you 10 minutes. And that's where I think some people are wondering about the discrepancy.
We have online too, but you have to have all the documents in a row. If you start to fill it out and then you find out that you need the fire marshal's approval, then that takes longer. So I'm not sure that we're 100% as efficient as Denver. They do a lot of these. They've got lots of staff dedicated just to food truck licensing. We've looked at what Littleton does. I think we're pretty comparable. I won't say that in every jurisdiction, but I do think that a lot of the difficulties come with the multiple steps, some of which are not directly related to just the licensing procedure.
Okay,
online.
thank you. And I appreciate you kind of going through those, and it helps explain the steps. So thank you. I'm not sure that I want to say that this is just resolved, because I think we're going to hear more about it, truth be told. But I really appreciate you going through those steps and kind of articulating them for everybody.
And I have asked for additional information for staff to, so we can provide more information to you to see where we're going.
Okay. One other one really quick. Thank you to Parks for the Easter egg hunt at Bellevue Park on Saturday morning. Excuse me. Wonderful. It was a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Councilmember Wink.
No report.
Councilmember Martinez?
I was going to echo the sentiments of the Councilmember Sierra on the Public Works interactive alley map. It's pretty cool. I was checking it out, and it's really easy to use. So thanks for all the work on that. And then just remind everybody that on Saturday is the South Platte Water Renewals cleanup event, if you're interested.
What time does that begin?
9 a.m.
Thank you. I have just a couple things. One is that I had one of those in the middle of the night, wake up and realize I hadn't pursued this with you all in terms of the manager search that we're going through. In the past, and I think I mentioned this very early on and then forgot about it, we have during these searches had a business community group also meet with the manager possibilities, and I think we picked a few from ACE and a few from the chamber and maybe a couple at large. Are you interested in that, in including that in the meeting time that a city manager a candidate would have here? And if you want to think about it and then just come back, we've got time to plan that in because it's not going to happen for another month. But I know that just kind of got slipped out of that possibility, and I think that our HR person would be willing to work with with Heidi, where he's on making sure that there's some kind of possible connection with our business community. At the time we were looking for the city manager, the last time around, the business community had a huge interest and investment and wanted to see some very specific things, and so it seemed very hot topic-ish at the time. Perhaps it's not right now, but I know that there's some that would probably be willing to serve. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll come back. I'll do city council requests. Maybe we just put it under that so that it's an agenda item at regular session under mayor's choice next week. So just put that in your ears. The second thing is the emails and the concern about Cora or just the open meetings laws. I am really uncomfortable with being emailed by someone who then can say whatever they want, and then I can't respond to everyone so that I get to have my voice heard too. And then sometimes somebody will email back individually, and then that gets sent back to all of us. To me, that constitutes we're pretty on shaking ground as open meetings. And so I would like to see us stick with the policy here. I thought that we had agreed that we would not email everyone and that we would simply work through the city manager, send any council requests to her, ask her to send things out to all of us if that's what we want. Is there a problem with us doing it like that I'm just unaware of? And is that what you all still want to do? We could certainly consider a different way of going about this. Councilmember Barentine.
Well, I think as a citizen who came to council a few meetings ago pointed out, that's not transparent and also isn't following the law either. When we have staff can communicate policies and issues to council, to all of us, it actually, as the city attorney's email was today, talking about issues and policy and communicating with all the council at the same time is actually the same issue. And then it just encourages people to go ahead and, like she said, as long as you just talk to one person, and then Rita talks to Dave, and then Dave talks to the mayor or staff, and it's all happening then behind the citizens' back. So I really have struggled with it in wanting to make sure that we are as transparent as possible, and the only way I can see that is to follow the council policy and notify all of council at the same time. We have the same problem when we have staff notifying and providing information. It's actually the same issue that we're all being given information on policy or issues from staff. So it kind of goes both ways. It isn't just council, it's happening from staff too. And then we're kind of encouraging people to just have these little side groups and not really make sure that we're all getting information at the same time. So I'm seriously struggling with this, but I don't think that the transparency is being served by shutting down the lines of communication. I think the city attorney made a really good suggestion about just making it all public, making it so that people have access to what's going on so that we're not cutting off the ability to get information or to have information go back. But we can't hamstring everybody's conversations or shove people into corners just talking to each other, because then that's daisy chaining things as well. So I'm very concerned. I am actually concerned that the email that the city attorney sent out violates the core for the very reasons that she gave in that email as well. It's only going to the 7 of us. It's about policies and procedures. We're being asked to consider issues, and it's not public. And so I'm not sure how we address that to make that public. She made a suggestion, but I'm trying the best I can to be as open and transparent and make sure that I'm communicating with all the council as much as possible.
Councilmember Barrington, I've been in council with you for 3 years now, and until you started to use your Englewood City email addresses, I've never gotten emails like this before from you. I've gotten lots of emails. I'm often, just for full disclosure, I get an email that is both me and Mayor Pro Tem and someone on staff, and I'm uncomfortable with that. That's 3 of us. Again, many emails like that in the last 2 months. I would like that part to stop. I think let's put them all through council to our manager, have her put them into the council requests right away, and then they're public to not just the 7 of us, 6 or 7 of us, but they're open to the public. If it's a research piece, then you send it back to us. We haven't talked about it to that level but if it's going to take more than an hour, then it comes back to all of us, and maybe it goes into the council request or a piece of, we need to decide as a group whether we're going to all demand that gets done. I don't know how else to
Respectfully,
do
I
this.
have done this before, and then you said, well, everything's got to go through a city manager, or that you just talk to your constituents. I started to use my Gmail account to do that, and then there was a problem with that. So quite honestly, I've brought it back because I think this is the most open, transparent way that I can handle this. And there are more transparent ways. I could do a website. And just make sure that everybody understands that any email I get is going to go out to the public. So I don't know how to work this out, because I also have a problem when you're just emailing specific people, because I don't have as much access to you or certain council members as other council members. So it's the most equitable way I could think of doing it.
Well, you'll see that I don't email anybody individually usually, unless they ask me, hey, what time's the meeting, or hey, I'm going to Dr. Cog for you, fine, which I don't think you all want your mail. So City Attorney, do you want to address this? And I thought your idea of the city portal was a great way to possibly do this.
So first thing, Councilmember Barentine made a couple of statements, and I need to correct what the law is so that everybody actually understands the law. The first thing, there are 2 laws. One is Open Records Act, and one is Open Meetings Act. The issue before council that I sent the email out on earlier today is not about Open Records Act. Anything that goes through Englewood's email system is subject to open records unless it has a specific privilege. So the issue here isn't open records, it's open meetings. Open meetings doesn't involve staff. So the fact that I send out an email to you, I don't create a meeting because I'm not a voter on the city council. If you all want to get information directly from a staff member, contacting the staff member doesn't create a meeting. What's creating the meeting is when one city council member sends out an email to 2 other council members or more. When you have 3 or more council members under state law discussing the business of the city, that is a meeting. And that's where the areas of concern are. I think I've been contacted by 3 of you now about being concerned because one of you thought that you had responded back just on a one-on-one, but then that email got picked up and sent back out to everybody. At that point, were they inadvertently included in creating a meeting? So it was after I got that concern that I wanted to send out an email. And please don't confuse CORA with Open Meetings Act. They are 2 different laws, and the Open Meetings Act only involves the 7 of your interactions.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
So in response to that, and I know that I have done this before, either to you or to the city manager, asked that you disseminate the information to all of council. If I've asked you, or the mayor has asked you, or any one of us has asked you to do that, is it, I mean, I'm asking you to disseminate the information. Is that violating the open meetings law?
That doesn't violate the open meetings law. When you're asking something to be disseminated, it's typically an administrative thing, type of act anyway. But when a document goes through, and it's again typically through the city manager, those documents become open record, and the public gets to know everything the city manager knows. The other thing is the city manager is not asking you to make decisions. She's not coordinating decision-making, back and forth exchanges. So an example, if you gave the city manager a document saying, please let them know what's happening at the mayor's meeting next week. They're going to be discussing the Arapahoe County bond issue for 2020. That information gets disseminated by the city manager. It's open record right then. But the city manager is not saying we need to know if 4 of you want to vote on it this way and make sure that we all know it, how the 4 of you are thinking about that in advance. So it's when the conversation starts on the topic. And the real concern is the way we've set up our agenda. It's possible for a conversation or an action to be taken that's off agenda. I mean, I really discourage that. You've heard me say that 100 times. But it's possible that an off-agenda item will be taken up, especially during council members' choice. And the real concern is if there's been any kind of distribution of information from one council member out to 2 or more, that council member's let everybody know how they're thinking. And then if it's brought up off agenda, then there's been information provided between council members on a matter that subsequently was voted upon that the council really is that the community's left out on. So even when the initial action has no intent to be an open meetings violation, it's the subsequent actions that can quickly cause it to go that direction.
And just along that line, so let's say any one of us, me, send an email to all of council. Maybe council members don't agree with it, or they do, or whatever. As long as no council member responds to that, that doesn't violate the open meetings law, correct?
That doesn't. But here's the issue. You have so many emails, all of you do, coming through. All it takes is one person not going back and checking the subject line to see who all the recipients were and hitting reply, and then the meeting has occurred. And the individual responding doesn't realize what they've done. So it's another thing to avoid doing it is to protect each other against creating the issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, in still my council request time, is that what it does is it sets us up for reading through something that someone might say about us or about a meeting that we disagree. It didn't happen like that. That's not exactly right. They have that information wrong, but I can't respond. So I have to bring it up in there. I'd rather have it in a council request. Everybody sees it. We all can read it. I don't want to be put on the spot. If I respond personally, which I think is what happened, trying to correct information, then that gets sent out, and then you are in an open meeting, really. So I really would like to see us stick with this at least for the next 2 weeks till we can get another study session on this to decide whether we're going to change the policy that I thought we had been moving toward and agreed. We have not voted yet on that, but it seems to be the most open, transparent way we can do this. So can we agree to that at this point?
I have one other question.
All right, quickly.
For example, if we have a town hall meeting, or we have a website that we do any information on, or we have Nextdoor, which several council members have opined on, and then we still know how that person thinks on a particular issue, and I don't know whether we can respond or not respond, but we're acting as if this is the only medium that adjusts these council emails as if that's kind of, sacred ground, and I don't think it is. And
So what was the question?
part of the problem that happened, and I'm sure you can answer this, is that I had particular things that I had brought up very publicly that were agreed on, that no objection happened, and then I heard a meeting for the mayor-manager meeting where information and decisions were made, and how people thought and how they felt and how they were going to vote was being discussed, and that's really the only...
Right, I'll deal with that right off the bat because I think that's what, and then I'm going to end this discussion.
Sure.
The mayor-manager meeting, we talked about bringing a staff person to the meeting, which I don't believe we had consensus to do that at all. We had several people say they would bring it if it was in the context that there was required for that staff person to show up, and you interpreted it a certain way, but I was pretty sure that 4, if not 5, had not agreed to that. It was a little different. So given that, it was really hard then to respond to something that an email had been sent out where I really can't respond to that. It needed to go to the city manager for that. So let's stop there right now. And I would like to ask,
On to the mayor-manager meeting.
send it through the city manager and say, I have a council request. Please listen to this.
Consensus on that.
Point of decorum.
Yes.
The mayor, did you ask that we stop the discussion?
Yes, I did. Thank you. We will assume that we are not sending each other anything anymore until we have another discussion about this. Please send it through the city manager. If you don't, and I keep getting things for 2 or 3 people, I will be asking that you block me from email because I am not going to be put in an open meetings lawsuit, which people could throw up at any moment. Okay? So that was the end of mine. City manager. City attorney. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Transparency was important.
Is this your phone, Councilmember Questa?
You're welcome. Yes. So did I. It was consensus. And now a rewrite of history.
I think we hear things differently, and so it's okay. It's okay. We're going to hear things differently.